오십시오.
안녕하세요.
네. 이렇게 정말 먼 길 오셨는데요. 바쁘신 일정 중에 저희 BTN불교TV 지대방을 찾아주셔서 감사합니다. 우선 우리 시청자 여러분들께 스님 인사 말씀 부탁드리겠습니다.
안녕하세요. My name is Master Yunghwa. I'm very glad to be here. I'm honored to be here with you, 스님.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
네. 우리 스님께서는 지금 미국 위앙종을 이끌고 계신데요. 먼저 위앙종에 대한 소개를 부탁드리고 싶습니다.
It's not quite true that I'm leading the Weiyang lineage in the United States. It's more like I learned from a Weiyang patriarch,
Yeah.
and I liked it a lot, and therefore I'm using a lot of the Weiyang training and my teachings.
우리 스님께서는 1995년에 위앙종의 법맥을 잇는 선화상인을 은사로 출가를 하셨어요. 은사이신 선화상인에 대해서 좀 소개를 해주시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 어떤 분이셨는지요?
Master Hsuan allowed me to become a novice under him in 1995. And he's a rather ordinary person. When you meet him in person, you don't notice that he's anyone special at all. And that's what really stuck me, because I met many monks and sunims and high-level sanghas afterwards. And if I look at all the monks and high-level sanghas I met, including Dalai Lama and so forth, I must say that he is the most unremarkable monk I've ever met.
Yeah.
He ranks very, very low.
네, 우리 스님께서는 2005년에 이 보디라이트 인터내셔널을 설립을 하셨어요. 제자들을 지도하면서 미국 LA의 노산사와 또 위산사 등을 창건을 하셨습니다. 어떤 계기가 있으셨을까요?
Yes, it started by my beginning to teach at the living room of my brother's house. And later, within a year or so, I was invited to teach at Lu Mountain Temple. And that was it. I had no grand dreams of being a great teacher or having a lot of disciples. I started teaching because my Chinese teacher, Master Hsuan, ordered me to do so. So I taught reluctantly, if you will. But opportunities kept on presenting themselves to me. So I started teaching, for example, at the living room of my brother's house. And then later, Lu Mountain Temple was offered to me, and I accepted, and the temple became full. So I started looking for another temple. And it took us about 2 years of looking for another temple. And amazingly, for 2 years, I traveled all over from San Diego to Los Angeles. Between that area, I traveled back and forth every single weekend.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find anything that's suitable for us at all. And when I was about to give up, and one night I looked at the advertisement and Wei Mountain Temple was available. So I immediately jumped at that.
우리 위산사하고 노산사 이 네이밍을 우리 스님께서 하셨나요?
Well, yes.
어떤 의미가 있을까요?
Lu Mountain Temple was, I chose a name after the birthplace of the Pure Land Dharma Door in China. So I figured that after its name Lu Mountain Temple in China, no other places, no other temple would take that name in the world. So I decided that since we're going to be teaching Pure Land Dharma Door in the U.S., that would be the starting point. So that's why I chose Lu Mountain Temple.
Yeah.
And later, when we got to Wei Mountain Temple, I thought I had to come up with a name. And originally, when I first started teaching, I decided I would be teaching both Chan and Pure Land. My first love is Son. I love to practice Chan, and that's what made me leave the home life. Yeah. And but in order to teach, as per my teacher's order, I had to choose something that has a broader appeal to people, and therefore I had to teach Pure Land. So I decided, since very few Sunims are willing to teach both Chan and Pure Land at the same time, so I decided maybe you should teach both Chan and Pure Land in parallel, and that's always been our direction, always Chan and Pure Land at the same time. And so when we were able to get Way Mountain Temple, I had to choose a name for it. I decided it has to be a Chan name because we have Lu Mountain Temple already, which is Pure Land Temple, although very, very tiny, if you will. It's embarrassing, it's so small. And then Way Mountain is so much bigger, okay? And so I chose a Chan name, and I thought of, since Lu Mountain Temple is a starting point for our American Pure Land Dharma door, then Way Mountain would be the starting point for our Weiyang, American Weiyang Dharma door as well. So that's why it's named Way Mountain Temple.
스님 이름을 잘 지으신 것 같아요. 박수 드리고 싶습니다.
감사합니다.
네. 선하상인으로부터 전해진 가르침과 어떤 수행법에 따라서 많은 사람들이 함께 수행을 하고 있다고 들었습니다. 미국식 대승 수행법이라고 명명된 이 찬 메디테이션 과연 무엇인가 궁금한데요. 그 부분에 대해서 설명을 좀 해주시죠.
Yes, I started by teaching using Master Hsuan-Hua's foundation as a Chan master. I happened to admire his Chan skills. I looked around, I found his Chan teaching to be very profound. Can take people very, very far. Okay, so yes, I started by following in his footsteps. I started, for example, by teaching my students to sit in full lotus, because very few teachers would do that. The Americans tend to be not willing to endure the hardship in the training, because in the United States, most meditation classes are more a pleasant experience. And so for us to, and I'm not a Me Too kind of person. I wanted to do something different to add to the depth of American meditation experience. So I decided to follow Master Hsuan-Hua because his contemporaries and his disciples of my generation are not willing to teach full lotus anymore. So I started teaching by the basics of full lotus, of enduring the pains and the discomfort from the training. So the fundamentals in the Weiyang training is part of that. If I may say so, part of the characteristics of a Weiyang training is that we ask you to do something that's not easy for you to do. It's uncomfortable, and that's the base. Okay, and then after that, what happened is that my students, although they're quite only a small number, a handful of students, but they are hardworking, just like the Koreans here as well. I found that, to my surprise, that the Korean culture is very, very profoundly Mahayana. And Korean people in general are very hardworking, and they're not afraid of hardships and challenges. And so many of my disciples, they love the difficulties, they love the challenges, and they stuck with it, and that's why they progress very quickly. They progress to the point where I'm proud to say they exceeded my master's disciples' level. So if I were to continue in the same style that he taught, then it's very difficult for my disciples to go further. So I decided I should add more to my disciples, because I was waiting around for the next patriarch in the United States to surface, but he still refused to surface. So, because my plan, believe it or not, was to hang around long enough so that when the next patriarch, second patriarch, American patriarch comes out, I would simply tell my disciples to go over to him and learn from him. That was my original plan. However, as the second patriarch still didn't come out, and my disciples got to be better and better and better, and I couldn't wait anymore, so I had to come up with something else. So I came up with something I called American Weiyang, because the style is a little bit more advanced than the Chinese style that my master brought to America and used to train his disciples. Let me be clear about this. My level, my Chan skill level is way below my Chinese master's Chan skills. So I will never be able to claim that I'm better than him at all. Okay? It's never my intention. My problem is that my disciples, quite a few number of them are pretty good. So I had to come up with something better to keep them challenged and keep them going. And that's why I came up with something called American Weiyang to differentiate that from our style versus Master Hsuan style. And if I could summarize in one simple word, is that I put more stress on the certain teaching that Master Hsuan did not do for his disciples.
우리 스님께서는 한국과도 인연이 깊으신데요. 2020년에 청주 보산사에서 이어서 또 2021년에는 분당의 보라선언을 개원을 하셨어요. 어떤 인연으로 한국까지 오셔서 이렇게 또 사찰 두 곳을 개원을 하셨는데 어떤 인연이 있으신지요?
I came to Korea and I met a few Korean Buddhists who are very devoted disciples of the great masters, such as 영화스님, and I really like the hospitality that was extended to me, and I love the kimchi.
네.
And Korean food is so delicious.
네.
It's always a pleasure to eat Korean food. And so it's a very enjoyable experience. And for some reason, a few Korean disciples took a liking to my teaching. And so they decided to ask me to come to Korea. So this is how we live I live my life. I really have no big dreams at all. I have no ambition at all. I'm very lazy, to be honest with you. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to have a lot of disciples. I don't want to have a lot of temples. My story, the story of my life is that I feel compelled to do things because I'm asked, not because I want to. So I came to Korea, and a good number of Korean disciples offered things to me. He said, I like you to have land, I like you to have this and have that. And so they were sincere. So they said they'd like me to come to Korea to teach them, because I came and I decided to share our Chan and Pure Land practice in parallel. So I organized a short 3-day, what is it, 3-day Chan Chi, and a 3-day Fo Chi, something like that. And the people came to participate. Initially I asked to rent some temples, places. I arranged for places to big enough to organize them. The people came, and I was most impressed with the participants. There's some Sunims, and a lot of lay people came, and they're actually undaunted by the tough schedule we have. In America, people would drop out like flies. They don't last very long. Whereas here in Korea, what caught my attention is that the Korean Sunims and the Korean lay people hung in there, and they seem to like it. And after that, some asked me to bring that Dharma to Korea. And before that, one of my disciples, Sunim, who was a lay person, really enjoyed the Chan training she received from us. She also said, I would like to bring that Chan technology back to my country to benefit my countrymen. So those are the two combinations where I was encouraged to go to Korea, and the very enthusiastic response from the Korean Buddhist disciples, both lay people and Sunims, really impressed me. If anything at all, one thing I like to do, if possible, is to transfer my knowledge to the next generation as a token of gratitude to my teachers. I owe a lot. I owe my current life, where I'm at today, to their help, to their kindness and compassion. So I felt that I received so much from them, never asked me for anything. So I figured that one of the things I like to do before I retire, if I have a chance to retire at all, is to transfer my knowledge to the next generation so that Mahayana thrives on. And so I came to Korea and I saw how impressive the Korean disciples are. They're so receptive, and how they have great Mahayana roots. So, and finally, the third thing is that my disciples, my Korean disciples, asked me to come here. So that's how we work in my world. I'm perfectly happy staying in my corner, but I only go out because people ask me to come, and they arrange for me to come. And so my disciples here arranged for me to find a place at Jewel Mountain Temple. So I came for the third time to Jewel Mountain to take a look, and I agree that's a place that's good enough for us to get started. And so that's how we found the Jewel Mountain Temple. And after that, I sent some of my better disciples here to train them, as well as to help them train the Koreans here. And so they came, and within a year or so, a lot of Korean disciples came, and they liked the training. And so that's why we decided that a lot of them actually came from the Seoul area to Cheongju, even though it's a 2-hour drive for them, and it's a long drive for them. And they still came, a lot of them came. So I figured that maybe we should open a place in Seoul where it's easier for them to get to. So that's how Jewel Conk started.
스님 말씀 중에 그 선칠, 불칠에 대해서 말씀해 주셨는데 조금 더 구체적으로 어떤 수행법인지 좀 설명을 해 주시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
The Fochi is traditionally what the Chinese do to train the people. It's based on the Buddhist sutras, based on the Chinese Pure Land Patriarchs' teachings. So we get together for 7 days to recite the Buddha's name. So we have a program starting from 4 in the morning until around 9, 10 o'clock at night. So it's a full program like that. So you do that for 7 days, and hopefully with that process, you'll be able to enter the Buddha ray stage in Samadhi. That's what how the Chinese train the people. And The Fochi is also a precursor to the Chanchi, because the Fochi more or less prepares people so that they are then followed, the Fochis is then followed by the Chanchi, where the training is more intensive, where instead of reciting Buddha's name like in the Fochi, we do some meditation from 3 in the morning until midnight. And so it's about a lot of sitting. So we sit for about an hour. We then walk for 20 minutes and sit again. And so total is about 14, 15 hours of sitting and a lot of walking. And so you have very little rest. And so the Fochi is a very wonderful Dhamma door where by around the 3rd day or 4th day, if you follow the schedule, you will be able to increase the concentration when reciting Buddha's name. Hopefully, by then or after, you'll be able to enter samadhis. Okay. And as far as the Chanchi is concerned, the Chanchi is where, as the Chinese patriarchs put it, where we select the future Buddhas. So it's very, very demanding, and it helps people become enlightened, and we have very good results. Basically, the secret about the Chanchi, you will. So the Fochi secret is that repetition. You recite Buddha's name all day, and that puts you in the right frame of mind to enter samadhi. Whereas the Chanchi is the secret of Chanchi, as far as I can understand from the Chinese training, is exhaustion.
우리 한국 불자들이 어려운 수행을 좋아하니까 앞으로 좀 더 어렵게 하셔도 될 것 같고요. 우리 스님께서 한국에 좀 오래오래 머무셔야 될 것 같습니다. 그러셔야 될 것 같아요. 스님께서 이제 제가 인터뷰하신 기사도 읽어보고 했는데요. 불자들이 수행함에 있어서 선지식을 찾아서 도움을 구하는 것이 가장 중요하다라는 말씀하셨는데, 과연 그러면 선지식을 우리가 일상 속에서 어떻게 찾아야 할 것인가? 어떤 부분에서 스님께서 중요하다고 말씀하시는지 말씀 좀 해주세요.
Good question. This is the essence of my master's teaching. The one thing I learned from my late Chinese teacher, Master Shenhua, is the one thing that sticks in my mind is that to look for a good no advisor, because he left me very early. He allowed me to become a novice monk, and then he died immediately, a few months later. And so I was at a loss. So my entire life, I only knew that I had to look for a good no advisor, and I kept on looking and looking and looking. Unfortunately for me, I look at his disciples, I look at the known teachers and so forth. I couldn't find anyone at all. So my personal story is that, all I had is that I knew one good no advisor, which is my deceased teacher. So what did I do? Since I couldn't find a person alive to learn from, I went back to his teachings and research his teaching and follow his teaching to the letter. And after I was told by him, when I was meditating to start teaching, I said, wow, this worked for me. Yeah. So I should be doing this as well. I should teach the same thing that I learned from him. So the good no advisor is a very important concept. Good no advisor is a wise teacher who is enlightened. And therefore, you can put your trust in him. You basically, if you want to become enlightened, it's the one requirement, that is total faith in your good no advisor. So you put your life, you put your future into the hands of someone that person better be enlightened. Enlightened person who have wisdom would never do anything intentionally to harm you, but only good things for you. So that's why once you find a good no advisor, you should put all your trust, your faith in the good no advisor. So that's, to me, that's the essence of Mahayana. I teach my disciples that. I keep on telling them that I'm here temporarily only. I hope you find a real, authentic good no advisor who's wiser than me. And if I do find one, I will be the first one to tell you to go over there and not waste your time with me. Okay, so it's for me as well. As to this date, I never stopped looking for a good no advisor. I came to Korea and I too look for good no advisors. And I look at many Sunims and look at the videos of past Sunims as well. And so I look at Japan, I look at everywhere, China and everywhere. And so it's looking for a good no advisor is an ongoing search. You never stop until you become a Buddha. Yeah. And how do you look for one? I can tell you where not to look. Okay? And that is, don't look at lay people.
Yeah.
Because in Buddhism, this is a very big misconception about Buddhism nowadays. The Buddha said, the Buddha Dharma depends on the Sangha for its transmission. And therefore, I met a few very high-level enlightened lay people, higher than most Sunims, by the way. I'm higher than most Sunims I met, if you will, or could recognize. And these lay people, they have tremendous wisdom, they have tremendous skills, and yet they don't teach at all. And that tells you there, it's kind of true wisdom you have. Okay, and so you look for a good advisor. You certainly need to look at the monks and nuns. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you need to plant blessings in order to be taught. The people nowadays, in the modern times, have the wrong attitude. They think that they're special, right? And they have the right to be taught. And Buddhism is not like that. Mahayana is a gift. It's a bequeath teaching from a high level person wisdom to a low level wisdom person, and therefore it needs to be respectful. The young people nowadays are not taught to be properly respectful. That's why when they encounter a good no advisor, the good no advisor will look at them and say, "You're not respectful enough to be taught." Excuse me. So that's one of the things you need to do is be respectful, and be a good person. Because a good no advisor, as the name says, good, meaning this person is a good person who can then recognize a good person. Good no advisors recognize good people or transforms them into good people.
정말 그런 것 같습니다. 우리가 수행을 함에 있어서는 끊임없이 우리가 선지식을 찾아 나서는 거 정말 중요한 것 같은데요. 우리가 살아감에 있어서 주변에 있는 선지식을 우리가 볼 줄 아는 눈을 갖추는 것도 굉장히 중요하다 이런 생각이 듭니다. 그래서 화엄경에서 53 선지식이 나오는 이유가 아닐까. 내 주변에 정말 농부가 저에게 선지식일 수도 있고, 오늘 내가 갔던 구멍가게 주인이 나에게는 큰 선지식일 수 있기 때문에 공부하면서 그런 분을 선지식으로 볼 줄 아는 눈을 갖추는 거 굉장히 중요할 것 같습니다.
Yes, I agree with you absolutely. It's called Dharma selecting eye. However, the one thing though is it's a good no advisor who recognizes the student. The student cannot recognize a good no advisor. What I did is since I cannot recognize my good no advisor, I looked at his disciples. So when I look at Master Shenhua, I couldn't see where he was. And so I look at his disciples, and his disciples are really accomplished cultivators. So that's usually where you can look as well. Look where the good no advisors are and where the disciples are.
우리 스님께서는 이제 다양한 문화권에서 또 다양한 국가에서 자라온 스님들을 지도를 하셨는데 우리 한국 불교에서 느끼는 이 한국인 수행자가 가진 어떤 남다른 장점이 있을까요?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. This trip here, I'm very pleased with this time around, my fourth time in Korea. It's because I'm able to see many of my disciples after 2 years. They've been working hard. I'm very pleased to find that they've been progressing very well. And also, I was able to encounter some great teachers, some Sunims here. And so that's why I feel that Korean Buddhism is very strong. It's still very strong.
우리 스님께서는 이제 그 홀로 득도하는 수행의 삶보다는 세상 속으로 들어가는, 그러니까 대중 속으로 들어가서 실천하는 일상의 불교를 스님께서는 강조하고 계시거든요. 그 부분에 대해서 말씀을 좀 해주시죠.
Yes, that's my preferred approach. Is that to engage with the secular life? Is because Master Huineng, quoting Master Huineng, the sixth patriarch, he says that if you look for enlightenment away from the world, it's like looking for a rabbit with a horn. Meaning that the enlightenment can be found in everyday life. You don't need to go to the mountain. You don't need to go to the valley in order to look for it. And I find it to be very true for our disciples. Our disciples come from the big cities because of their training, their jobs, and so forth. And therefore, I personally found that they're more challenging to teach. They're more receptive to teaching if the teaching are useful to them. And in particular, we find a lot more of them. If our purpose to propagate Buddhism is to make it available to people, then we have to go where people are. We can't simply go and hide or isolate ourselves behind four walls and a fence in front and separate ourselves from the outside world. That doesn't work. That's what I call Hinayana Mahayana. Our style is to engage with people, and that's how I train my people by, first of all, learning to be sensitive to people's needs and sufferings. That builds kindness and compassion, okay? And of course, many of them suffer. For example, I have a recent Korean bhikshuni, and she struggles a lot because, as you can imagine from your own experience, to go from a regular life to being a left-home person is a big shock, okay? So for us, it's a very important period of adjustment. And normally, we like to quit. Most people quit. Most Sunims, young trainees quit because of that. They're not used to the shock of having life the way you want, living the way you want, versus being told what to do. Okay, especially young people nowadays, it's just very, very difficult concept. Okay, especially the instruction don't make sense at all to young people. So that's a challenge for the young trainees nowadays. And they quit because not enough is being explained to them. You cannot be authoritarian and say, do this, do that. What we do in our program is we tell them, but then we gradually explain to them why. It's to their benefit to do those things. Okay, and so this new bhikshuni here we have, Korean bhikshuni we have here in Korea, she struggles a lot, and I realize that, and so finally I was able to, after 2 years to come here, and I made sure that to bring her along to wherever I went and engage with her. You see, when we eat lunch, our disciple will separate us, lunch for us, senior people, and lower level people, different table. So I asked, let's not do that. Let's join the tables together so that we all eat the same food, we talk about the same thing, and we share a meal together. And so she says after a year of struggle, and she finally talked to me the other night, she says, I finally learned something that you're trying to tell me. I finally got it. That our lifestyle is about kindness and compassion. And in order to develop kindness and compassion, you need to feel people suffering. So that's why we welcome everyone to our temple and let them cry to us. By the way, I'm known to make people cry when they talk to me. And so it helps. And so she says, well, I see you doing those things here and watch how you interact with the Korean disciples and the newcomers and the Sunims and low-level, high-level Sunims. I said, I like something about our lifestyle. It's a lifestyle of compassion, a lifestyle of kindness. And it's worth pursuing. It made me very happy to hear that from her own words.
그렇습니다. 스님 말씀 듣다 보니까 자비라는 것이 높은 데 있는 것도 아니고 또 먼 곳에 있는 것도 아니고 우리가 함께하는 곳에 스님 말씀 속에 다 있는 것 같습니다. 그래서 우리 제가불자님들도 또 국적을 초월해서 많은 제자들이 우리 스님께 찾아가서 가르침을 구하는 것 같습니다. 오래오래 건강하셔야 될 것 같습니다.
감사합니다. Thank you very much. You're very kind.
자, 이 시간 지대방에서는 미국 위산사에서 수행과 포교를 하고 계신 영화스님을 모시고 이야기 나누고 있습니다. 이 시간은 우리 시청자 여러분들께서 모아주신 소중한 후원금을 통해서 제작되고 있습니다. ARS를 통해서나 또 붓다회를 통해서 여러분들께서 꾸준히 후원해 주시는 그 마음을 감사히 받아서 저희 BTN불교TV가 앞으로도 부처님 말씀을 한국을 넘어서 세계로 전하는 일에 최선을 다하도록 하겠습니다. 앞으로도 여러분들께서 기꺼이 동행을 해주시면 감사하겠고요. 또 기꺼이 후원을 해주시면 고맙겠습니다. 자, 우리 스님께서는 전 세계에 이 부처님의 가르침을 전하고 계신 스님이신데 앞으로의 스님의 원력과 어떤 계획이 있으실까요?
I really have no big plans. I live my life very simple. I like to repay my teacher's kindness. I owe so much to my Master Shinhua, who transformed me. I'm a totally different person nowadays than when I used to be as a lay person. And in particular, I'm a lot happier as a monk, as a person. And the people who practice Mahayana with us, they're all happier. It's wonderful to see that. So to me, I'm very simple-minded. My teacher told me to teach, therefore I'm teaching. It's only because I have to. I was given a gift that changed my life and made me turn me into a better person. And therefore, that gift is so precious that I like to make sure that I share it with the next generation. So yes, in that vein, then I would like to, as long as I'm able to do that, I'm able to receive help to do that, I would like to share with as many people as possible. So yes, I evolved a little bit. I don't have any big vows, you will, because I don't understand enough to commit myself to something I cannot handle. But I find myself becoming more interested in spreading the wealth, spreading the goodness, and spreading the happiness. And for example, I came here this time to Korea because we had to deal with the PCR tests, with a lot of unknowns, with the pandemic is raging here, and a lot of grief and a lot of anguish here. And I came here, and all of a sudden, for this time around, my plan was simply to spend time with our people, to show that we care and share into their struggles and their suffering. But it turns out that I get to meet a lot of very interesting Korean people, Sunims like you, for example. It's very enjoyable for me to be here today with you. I learn a lot. And I also learn a lot from many Sunims I met the past month or so. And so, yes, I would like to spread more of this and have the chance to meet more interesting people, interesting teachers. And yes, I'm still looking for a good no advisor.
네. 참 우문의 현답을 해주시는 것 같았습니다. 스님의 그 원력 속에서 많은 분들이 또 깨달음을 구하고 행복을 찾아가면 좋겠습니다. 스님께서 걸어가시는 길에 저도 뒤에서 기도 드리겠습니다. 스님 건강하십시오. 네, 오늘 지대방에서는 중국 위앙종의 법맥을 잇고 계신 영화스님과의 시간으로 함께했습니다. 스님께서 들려주신 육조단경의 한 구절로 이 시간을 마무리하겠습니다. 응무소주 이생기심이라 응당 머무는 바 없이 그 마음을 내라는 뜻입니다. 어느 곳에도 머물거나 집착하지 말고 마음을 열고 경계를 없애면 인생은 충분히 매력적이다라는 말씀입니다. BTN불교TV의 모든 프로그램은 여러분들의 소중한 후원금을 통해서 제작되고 있습니다. 의미 있는 시간 만들 수 있도록 동참해 주시고 후원해 주신 여러분들을 축원하는 마음으로 몇 분을 소개 올릴까 합니다. 우리 권경숙 불자님, 김근식, 김춘옥 불자님, 남호성, 박명동 불자님, 그리고 이재아 불자 가족 여러분 진심으로 감사드립니다. 오늘 지대방 시간은 여기 있어 마무리하고요. 다음 시간에도 귀한 분 모실 테니까 여러분들 꼭 잊지 말고 함께해 주시기 바랍니다. 오늘 끝까지 시청해 주셔서 감사합니다. 성불하십시오.